Hello, everyone. So we did some of this in the last class, but some people couldn't get to speak. And then I also got some feedback that last class was a little bit a way too open forum. So today we'll have a little more structure around the discussion. We have been doing these chapters one at a time. So we have covered the first 6 chapters, and now I figured it would be good to take a pause and just review and what your ideas are around these first 6 chapters. The first 6 chapters themselves are quite phenomenal, and we could literally just stop here and there's plenty for people to review and learn from this. So all right, so let me just okay, so the way I look at first 6 chapters is, basically the summary is desireless actions, and that will lead you to peace as you're dealing with the world, right? So these are the 6 chapters, and these titles come from, so we are reading Aurobindo Ghosh primarily, and Gandhi's Gita, Aurobindo Ghosh's Gita. There is one thing I would recommend at this point is if you guys can get access to his book called as Essays on Gita, that would be nice. But if you don't have it, that's okay. I'll be getting that, and I'm mixing different ideas from different swamis and different people and different ideas, and along with the Aurobindo being my primary source, if you will. So these titles come directly from his breakout of the 6 chapters. So the first,
actually, if you don't mind, if you just go to the previous slide. Sorry, just the previous slide that you had. Yeah, so I know this is my first time attending, so I really don't know the format so much, but I know there are many people who are, I don't know if there are people new, but I'm new. If somebody tells me the Bible, I'm totally new about it. I don't know much about it, but I try to explain Bhagavad Gita to somebody, saying, just like Christians have the Bible, or Muslims, they have their own book, or the Jews, this is the Bible of the Hindus, or you can say this is the Bible is the Gita of the Christians, you can say, or the Bhagavad Gita is the Bible of the Hindus. And it was given on the battlefield when Arjuna was in a dilemma. In the first chapter that you say, that the stage is set for the rest of it, saying, well, you want to fight, you have to fight, but you don't want to fight because you are not sure what your duty is. And then the whole 18 chapters get narrated by the God himself in the battlefield. So this is not something given in a temple, it was given right in the battlefield to everybody. So that's just my 2 cents on the background of how the book started and how it is the Bible of the Hindus.
Yeah, we covered that. Yeah, so we covered that in greater detail. Okay, all right. So next is okay. So we have 4 characters, right? People who have been with us. I see some of the regulars here. So there's the blind king who is deluded. There is the narrator. So today we are not going to go into lots and lots of details. This is more of us to kind of, we already understand the background. We already understand, and we have had long discussions on those. So the idea here is to peel off the layers and come up with some deeper philosophical understandings of some of the things that we have talked about, right? So there are basically 4 characters, right? Blind king, the narrator, the Sanjaya, the warrior, the Arjuna, who is actually completely dejected and he doesn't want to fight, but he also is a good learner. And then Blessed Lord, or we have talked about this in other Upanishad classes and Drigdrisha Viveka and all of that stuff. To us, it's basically the consciousness, right? And in this case, it's Krishna. So now one thing here to note of these characters, right, is that it's kind of interesting that we can look at our lives, and a lot of this has to do with our own self, not others, right? It's about me, myself. So I can fall in any of these categories at different points of situation. And I could be deluded at some point. I could actually be very unbiased to a given situation. I could feel dejected. This happens all the freaking time, right? With the chaos that we have to deal with. And then how the clarity comes about. So these are really our inner states of our mind, right? Blind, basically, the king himself, he doesn't want to change things. He just wants to continue being king. He wants his son to be the king. He cannot drop it, and that's sometimes not wanting to change can be our state, effectively. The narrator, he is neither on this side or the other side, right? He is literally just enjoying this story as he is seeing. There's a lot of trying to figure out, like, how did narrator try to understand what was going on in the battlefield, right? So what was that power? Who knows? But really, from the device that this book uses, is this narrator just telling the story to blind king, not story, but what is happening actually in the field, right? In the battlefield. So he has quite a bit of a self-control, if you will, right? This could be a good good thing for some of our journalists and news readers, or news providers to probably have this kind of an approach, right? Or even us, when we are looking at a situation, if we can have a very clinical mind rather than having a very emotional attachment to a certain situation based on our past experiences, right? And then the person who himself, the warrior himself, right? He is confused. He is very much about the relatives, my brother, my sister, my grandpa, my teacher. How am I going to kill them, right? So this is our constant battle. Everybody is struggling through this day to day, right? We cannot really it's easy for us to hate somebody, or take action against somebody and be very unbiased towards somebody who is not our family member or not in our circle of influence, or our friendship circle or whatnot, right? It is easy for us to pick on somebody who is totally away from our country. We don't see their faces. We see this all the time in all these wars that are going on. But here, what this is talking about is our much more difficult problem, right? And as this subtitle kind of tells here, right? So this Bhagavad Gita is not about, it's not teaching you anything about how to make more money or how to win this war. That's not the point of this. So this has to do with really being human. Being human has a couple advantages versus being gods or demons, right? And definitely over animals. So how can we grow past our human condition of confusion and dejection into something that is a little more closer to self, or this knowledge? And every time we refer to knowledge, it has nothing to do with physics or science or math or any of that stuff, right? Knowledge really is about consciousness, right? So the fact that I can see my senses, my mind, my intellect away from me, right? So these are something that is completely almost objects for me. And so this me, this I, the feeling of I-ness is the most important eternal knowledge, right? So that is what that is the pursuit according to Gita, right? And that pursuit is the primary pursuit in pretty much everything that we have to do in our life, and if we continue with our human dejected nature and trying to run after our likes and dislikes, what happens is that knowledge gets more and more covered up and you can't see things clearly. And that is the ignorance, right? So that is a state that is below. So the first chapter focuses on the battlefield, right? So kshetra is field. And the field happens to be our body and mind. You know, if you really peel off the layers of the story, Mahabharata, where the thing is happening, the fight between the brothers, this is really about us, our inner turmoil. And the idea is, as you're moving up, that Kurukshetra, or the field, the battlefield, basically becomes the dharma kshetra. Field becomes the dharma, right? So everybody, the fight, my inner calling, the people, what am I doing there, right? All of that basically becomes dharma. And here, something that we cannot explain guides us towards self-knowledge. That is the Atma Jnana. And so as you're moving upwards, this is supposed to happen, right? If you stay in the kshetra, you're confused. And there's a vicious circle that is going to pull you down. And that effectively is Kurukshetra. That's the battlefield where people are going to be maimed and killed, and there's confusion. Some people have very good attitudes. Some people have evil attitudes and all of that stuff, right? The field is rife with desires and actions. Here the senses are driving us, and we are very unbalanced towards the ignorance, the darkness, right? And this is the ajnana. Jnana means knowledge, right? No knowledge. So that is the first chapter, right? Effectively. And I think today what we are going to do is we are just going to kind of, I have pulled out some key phrases that I think we could either quickly read, and then maybe we can talk about it. And if you have some ideas about some of these, unfortunately, what happens, Jason, is I think when we have the slides, right, it's really hard to kind of focus on slides or discussion, and that's one of the problems. Anyways, so do we want to continue talking about 1 and 2, or do we want to really focus, because we did 1, 2, and 3 last time? Do we want to focus on 4, 5, 6? Anybody wants to chime in? Jason, what do you think?
Did anybody have any question, or we may start for like a few questions. If there's no question, then we can continue. Yeah, so that would think.
Shall we move forward 4, 5, 6?
Okay, great. Okay, so 1 vote for that. Anybody else?
Hey, there is one question. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, because I watched the video you post.
Yeah, good. Thank you for reminding me. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, I think that's
that video. Yeah.
Yeah, and my question is, how's the relationship between the what's his name? The Gandhi and
Aurobindo.
Aurobindo. Yeah. What's the relation? Political to me, kind of like Aurobindo, kind of like Malcolm X, okay, and then Gandhi, kind of like Martin Luther King, okay. So I don't know how's their relationship. That's
okay. So I mean, I'm gonna try to explain that, but again, let's not divulge. Let's not go too detailed in that. So Aurobindo Ghosh and Gandhi's background is very similar, right? They study in Britain and then they focus in India, right? Gandhi becomes this very major leader. And then there is a lot of these different movements that are happening in India at that time, right? So Gandhi, he is on the west side of India. And Aurobindo Ghosh is on the east side near Calcutta and area on that side, right? And there are interesting freedom fighting movements happening on the east and on the west as well. There's somewhat of a collaboration between them. There is an element of, if you will, violent revolutionary movements, quite a bit of them. And then Gandhi comes about and he wants to change the whole thing to nonviolence. And Aurobindo Ghosh, at that point, he has gone through one uprising which he has participated, except he has not really committed the crime. So I think there's like some kind of bombing or something, and then he is put in jail. And that video is basically, it's just sort of picturizing the 1 year of the jail time that he gets, right? And if I was to read into the philosophies that Aurobindo wants to prescribe to, and then what Gandhi wants to say, Aurobindo's point is that it's, you cannot just bucket things into nonviolence and violence. At a given time, you are going to need whatever is needed at that particular time. So that was his stance, right? And he was, which to me tells me that he was okay with nonviolence. And then as he gets a little more philosophically deeper, what comes about is he is now saying it's really not about India. Yes, Indian freedom is important, but it's not about India. It's about inner growth, so that we generate these citizens in India who are much more focused on world betterment for everybody, the humanity itself, right? So that's his integral yoga. And then after his jail time, he pretty much kind of goes away from the scene of freedom fighting movement, right? So he pretty much goes into this philosophical pursuit of just the old Upanishads and Gita and all that. But Gandhi continues his fight. I don't know if Gandhi and Aurobindo ever really met or had any political discussions, because I think Aurobindo went off of the whole political scene pretty early on in his life, because he really thought that what the approach was being used was not as per what his beliefs were. But yeah, that's so the video itself is quite interesting and quite I don't know how many of you guys saw it, but it kind of shows, it kind of breaks out into 3 pieces, right? The video. The first piece is he is put in the jail and he's struggling. He's like, oh God, I mean, this is bad. This is horrible. This is just injustice against me. I did not do anything, and here I am. And this jail, there's mosquitoes, there's smell, bad odor. The hygiene is terrible, and all that stuff, right? So that is the first. That is the rejection of what has been given to you, and now what do you do with that, right? So as he starts going into the second phase, the teachings of, the idea, the notion of, for meditation, I need this very quiet place and all of that stuff. His alone time with himself now comes handy for him to kind of transition or transcend into the second stage of acceptance. Okay, this is the situation that has been given. There's a jail, there is all this stench, and then there is all these mosquitoes and all of that stuff. And he has all this alone time to kind of, he looks at this behavior of ants. There's this little narration there about, he has this. So this is again, we talk about smelling the roses, right? The smelling the roses piece never comes to us because we are so stimulated by everything that is happening outside us. We never really smell the roses. We look at a rose and our initial instinct immediately is, it's beautiful. Well, it's beautiful, but really that beautiful response might be a conditioned response from what we have heard for millions of years, that rose is beautiful. So here, this is his own inner aloneness that brings about a change for him to kind of accept the situation. And then he uses that situation to kind of transcend into, like, really, he starts appreciating everything. Not that he likes jail, but not that he hates jail. So this kind of, it's to me, it captures the essence of Gita, very well, that video and his experience. So I don't know how many of you saw that. Anybody else saw that video? Trevor did.
Last night.
You did. What did you think about it?
Well, you know, sorry. I'm having a debate. I'm calling out some anti-Semitism in the chat. So let me get back here. I think it's unintentional, but I want us to be careful always.
Oh, of course.
And so having a dialogue, and I think dialogues are important. You know, I read the Gita the first time. Almost 25 years ago. And so I started to read and I wanted to take notes. And so I didn't trust downloading the copy just because I didn't know where it was. So I wound up buying a copy.
Oh, what did you buy?
I bought the Penguin edition.
Oh.
And, you know, with any translation, there's going to be differences. But I watched the video and I was really interested. And then I went down a rabbit hole, which I hope that maybe we can get to either at a later date. And I want to be really nuanced about it because I love the Gita. And there were parts of it that just, boy, at almost 45 years were popping out at me. And then there were parts that I missed the first time that I want to apply some pressure to as well. And then I went down this rabbit hole of how various political groups in India have taken the Gita for their own
benefit.
political agendas, which obviously I don't think we're going to talk about, nor do I want to bring it up. But I was reminded of the way people in the United States have taken their own interpretation of the Bible, for example.
Well, yeah, there's also an interpretation of Gita which is very Eurocentric, and that happens all the time, right? So that's why you're right. The different political factions, they abuse Gita all the time. Not only political factions, right? You know, throughout the time, you know, even before Britishers, there have been different translations that if you see them, there's a slant about the current state of India. And everybody is trying to address the current problem. So we are living in a very interesting time at this point, right? With metaverse and AI and all of that stuff. So it's all, you know, that also speaks to the timelessness of this, is that, you know, how relevant the document becomes no matter what time you are. And, you know, ultimately the solution really is not out there, but in here. That stays throughout the time. People have used that for political things, for independence movement, variety of things. And yeah, we just talked. So that's why I like Ghosh's translation, because what he does is he kind of brings out that nuance about, like, okay, you know, at this point, a lot of people are focusing on Gita as if it is all about karma yoga. And he strongly believes that, yes, that is the first stage, but there are 2 more stages after that that you have to take to really get the full impact. But so yeah. Anyways, so yeah, I think are we spending way too much time, Jason? You let me know.
No, you decide. You decide. That's
we have few more slides.
Yeah, you probably pace the time and make sure we finish.
I don't have a clock in front of me, but
okay,
yeah,
I'm going to remind you if you. Okay, so
okay. So did you have a point to make?
Just a quick comment on this one, because I after I watched the video, I told you last time I find out Gandhi's translation is more readable. I start to read Gandhi, and then I probably will read Aurobindo's translation next time.
Essays on Gita is his book, and you're going to find it very eye-opening. You know, Gandhi's is awesome. So Gandhi, by the way, wrote it in a different language, Gujarati, and somebody else translated that. That's in the preface.
He's not writing in English.
He did not write in English. You know why? Because, you know, remember, his goal was to reach the common man, you know, stir up the common man.
Okay. I thought Gandhi's English is pretty good. Should be able.
No, his English is awesome. Remember, his goal is how can he bring the poor people in the fold of the independence movement, right? Because they were very isolated and they were the most troubled people. So his goals are noble and really awesome. Aurobindo has this very overarching, larger goal, if you will, right? Anyways, Essays on Gita is his book, and you should. I think I recommend, highly recommend, you get that. Okay, so chapter 2 is by far the, if you will, if you can understand this nicely, it's a foundation of Hinduism, in my opinion. It captures Vedanta. We have talked about Vedanta in our past lectures very nicely. So I'm not going to want to read all of this, I guess. So he says, finite bodies have an end, but that which possesses and uses the body is infinite, illimitable, eternal, indestructible. Therefore, fight, O Bharata. Right? So here he is trying to tell to Arjuna that, hey, look, this body, this mind, this intellect that we have is all just destructible, right? But there is something, this I am feeling, the consciousness feeling is much more immortal. On this path, no effort is lost, right? So if you take, let me pop up some of the bullets here. So Krishna then talks about two different paths, right? He talks about Sankhya, which is knowing this reality, that body embodies the immortal self. Winning and losing doesn't matter. So if you just understand this fact, that body embodies the immortal self, and body is dying, body is going to die. All these people out there in the battlefield, they're already here to fight. They are going to butcher each other, no matter what you think, Arjuna, right? So if he really understood that, that's it. That's the essence of the teaching, the Sankhya, and this is the path of knowledge. But he also says that because Arjuna is still very dejected, depressed, there is this other path, and he is later going to say that this path of yoga is a much more better path, because it is something that you're going to need as you are going to be in the knowledge path anyways, right? So yoga has to do with efforts. And this becomes very relevant for all of us, actually, right? We all believe in doing. We cannot just sit and think about Brahman and everything is just going to be dandy, right? That's the hope with Sankhya, but that doesn't happen. So we are always acting. We are always wanting to do. So he talks about yoga, and specifically karma yoga. And in this, there is the desireless action. One only has freedom to action. This is the 2.47. Thou hast a right to action, but only to action, never to its fruits. Let not the fruits of thy works be thy motive. Neither let there be in thee any attachment to inactivity. One has freedom to action, right? There are things that you want to do. Yes, that's your freedom. You don't have the right on the results, right? So not so much because you want to fight for those rights. No, that's not the point. The point is, if you're going to focus on the results, it's going to bring you sadness. So enjoy while you are acting, while you're in the action. Doer I is born, right? If so remember we talked last time too that the problem with this when we are doing action is that it is desire driven and goal driven, and there is a doership that comes into play, and that doership comes about you do because you desire the results, and you're happy and happy, and you're mostly always constantly thinking about the results while you're working through the action. Or the other thing is also that you just like, oh, I'm just not going to do anything. That's also, it's about when you have the skill set given to you, these are God-given skill sets, if you will. You want to use it productively in the society. So when you choose inactivity, that's also, you are saying, I am much more important, so I'm not going to do this action, right? So that is also not good. And that's what he says in the last part of that important phrase. And then he talks about this thing, by the way, right? So throughout this, Arjuna says, hey, look, if I am doing this, what happens if I am not able to be successful, right? So Krishna says in 2.40 that on this path, no effort is lost. So don't worry about it. Even littlest thing that you are going to do in this direction is going to be good. No obstacle prevails. Even a little of this dharma delivers from the great fear. We constantly live in fear. We are afraid of so many things. This also happens to be the drive for our need for prosperity or money and houses and whatnot, right? We are afraid of something that is going to destroy this feeling of I. I includes me, my body, my family, my house, my friends, and my country and all that stuff, right? It just keeps on growing from there on. So 2.52, he says, when thy intelligence shall cross beyond the world of delusion, then shalt thou become indifferent to scripture heard or that which thou hast yet to hear. So as he's talking about this, he's also reminding him, because Arjuna, remember, he says that, look, in the chapter 1, he basically says that if I'm going to fight this battle, I'm going to kill all these people. So many innocent people are going to die. And, when you destroy the society like this, there is a lot of evil that follows after that, right? So he's talking about this stuff. But many a times when we are trying to portray ourselves in better light, when an action is called upon us to do, we tend to go towards these logics, some kind of rationalizing of why you don't want to do, and you always have some good reasons to come about. So here he's talking about, oh, the scripture says that, if I kill other people, I'm going to go to hell. Don't you know about that, Krishna, right? Why are you pushing me into this? So here he is really, Krishna is very strongly against scriptures, by the way, right? Then shalt thou become indifferent to scripture heard or that which thou hast yet to hear. So the point here being that the intelligence has to be unconditioned. You can read Gita. Everybody's interpretation doesn't have to be with what Gandhi is saying or what Aurobindo is saying. This has to relate to your own lives. And until then, it's just a world of delusion. Senses, conditioning, social conditioning can drag the intelligence into delusion. So our desires, our eyes see something, we want that, or our eyes see something and we hate that. This liking and hating is happening in the mind. And we talked about this procedure last time, right? And the mind kind of says, oh, Mr. Intelligence, or brain, there are some memories, remember, from the past that this happened when this person was with me. So I think I'm justified in hating this person. And the mind basically has said that, look at all these memories in the past, intellect, and there's a reason why I want to hate this person. And now the brain or your intelligence is willing to go along with the mind. So the senses dragged mind, and mind dragged intelligence with it. And this is that, this is the cycle of delusion. And, this is the example of the chariot, right? Where the horses and the rein and the charioteer, the driver. So these are the basically the horses are the senses, the rein is the mind, and the charioteer is the intellect. And the horses are dragging the whole chariot hither-skither, right? And all over the place. So rise beyond scriptures, as you have heard, all or will hear, right? So this is where your intellectualization or rationalization of things, you want to kind of try to avoid. And then remember, in second chapter, at the tail end of it, Arjuna asks, hey, what are the qualities of this steady person, right? What is this steady wisdom supposed to look like? And that then Krishna explains about samadhi. Samadhi is basically where you have reached that equanimous state, and you're feeling very peaceful. That's that final state. Maybe nirvana is one of those states in Buddhism, right? There's so many different ways to explain that. He says that yoga is going to get you there, right? Steady wisdom based action. You have to do action. So this is really important key thing that he tells him is like, action is absolutely important. And this yoga is to gain balance, ultimately to drop the ego, right? And so the karma yoga that, I'm doing this action without the need for result. And in the next chapter, he's going to say that every action that you do, you're going to offer it to me. Me is our consciousness, our self, or if you believe in God, deity, or Krishna. If you believe in Krishna, you believe in Jesus, right? So you're saying it's some higher cause. So that higher cause basically makes your action more pure. So yoga is to gain that balance. So yoga, as we know a lot of these physical movements and stuff like that. While that is good, that brings balance in your body, ultimately that balance in the body has to kind of travel inside, balance in your mind, balance in your senses, balance in your intellect. What does balance mean is that this constant need to focus on the ego, focus on the desire, likes and hatreds and all of that stuff, that needs to go away, right? So if you're doing yoga, if this is not happening, then maybe that's what needs to be focused on. And ultimately, the other meaning of yoga is also meeting. So yoga has two meanings, right? One is the efforts, and then the other is meeting with self. So this is that final, okay, now everything is happening through self or the consciousness or God acting through me, sort of, right? And that's the great peace that he says here, right? He attains, who abandons all desires and lives and acts free from longing, who has no I or mine, who has extinguished his individual ego in the one and lives in that unity. He attains to the great peace, right? So this is that path. So in the third chapter, now what he's going to say, remember he says here, we have freedom to action. Even though we have freedom to action, now he's going to say, you want to do your action as an offering, all right? So definitely you abstaining from work is not the point, right? So that's, one way to reach, like not commit any crime or anything is just not do anything, right? Just go live in a mountain place or, wherever, isolated from the society. You're not going to commit any crime, right? So he completely says that that's not the way. So not by abstention from works does a man enjoy actionlessness, nor by mere renunciation of works does he attain to his perfection or the siddhi, all the different things that, superpower kind of things that you end up doing, the accomplishments of the aims of his discipline by yoga. Do thou do controlled action, for action is greater than inaction, right? Even the maintenance of thy physical life cannot be effected without action. So he cannot stress enough about action. Action can never be stopped. Nature, or we remember that diagram, we had the Purusha and the Prakriti. Purusha is our inner self, and Prakriti is anything outside, right? And in fact, Prakriti includes our inner nature and outer nature. So nature is a beautiful word in English, right? So nature kind of is like my nature. My nature is my mind, my thoughts, my senses, and all that stuff, right? And then the nature outside, I can see that all of that is Prakriti. All of this is an object to the subject within, the I, like myself. And all of this is happening. They have a certain law that guides them. That's what Krishna says here further down. Controlled action is key and greater than inaction, right? So we just read that. Action as an offering, right? So by doing works otherwise than for sacrifice offering. So if you're doing an action where you are not attributing it to a deity or your, deeper self, but you're doing it out of some requirement of your mind or your desire and all of that. This world of men is in bondage to works, right? So this is going to bring about your attachment and your enslavement, if you will, to that particular result or an action. And it is going to, basically lead to suffering. Even if you win, it's going to be suffering. You lose, it is going to be a suffering, right? For sacrifice offering, practice works, right? So this particular way of doing your action, O son of Kunti, right? Kunti is Arjuna's mother, becoming free from all attachment. So this is the way to not feel so bogged down by your wins and losses. Those are the attachments. Okay, so did somebody wanted to say something? Because I heard some voices there. I guess not, right? So let's just keep going through this. I want to get to like 4, 5, 6.
You prefer finish 6 and then discussion?
Okay, great. Yeah.
No, I'm asking you which way you prefer.
I can take some pauses along the way. But if you, I think it would be good if you kind of like just be patient, be with me, and if there's really a burning desire to speak, let me know. But as Krishna is saying, control your desire. I'm kidding. Now these actions, right? How do we do that, right? Whatsoever the best do it, that the lower kind of man puts into practice, the standard he creates, the people follow. So anything we do, anything, any damn thing, it doesn't matter. Be a good role model, not because everybody is like somebody's watching you. No, that's not the point. Somebody might be unknowingly watching you, right? And then he gives example of himself, right? Krishna gives example of himself. He says, even I am always in action, or even the Lord, or Lord in the sense, not quite God the way people who believe in God understand God, but it might also be just the universe, right? Just this whole prakriti, the whole the self, the consciousness, right? So all of that, how it is always in action in the sense that planets are moving and they follow the laws of gravity. There is laws of thermodynamics, and all of that stuff is happening, heat and everything. So if those laws stopped working, there will be chaos, right? So he gives that example, and he says, just like that, think of them as your role model. And then when you are doing it, you want to put your best effort, so that, not that you are going to get some kudos, but if somebody is watching you, they might say, like, maybe I want to do it, rather than, we have this tendency of like advising others, right? So, hey, why don't you do this, or why don't you do this? Especially if you have kids, right? You tell them like, oh, when I was young, I did it this way. Well, so I think there is where, if you practice it by example, or show it by example in your own life, that becomes much more, the other person, as they're watching you, you're not doing it so that they are watching you, you're just doing it. And then they look at it and they go, something might click in them, right? So that's what he's trying to say. And, definitely he's also trying to tell Arjuna that, it's you running away from the battle is going to set a really bad precedence, and it's going to be a bad example. It's going to be bad for the society, worse for the society compared to what you were saying about the butchering of people. But one, O mighty armed, he's calling Arjuna, right? Who knows the true principles of the divisions of the modes. So this is important, right? So here is where he kind of distinguishes the nature. He breaks it out into these 3 things, right? So the modes, realizes that it is the modes which are acting and reacting on each other, and is not caught in them by attachment. So what are these modes? Remember, we talked about them. It's the sattva, rajas, and tamas. So tamas is something that kind of like inertia, if you will. Rajas is activity, kinetic energy. You just want to do something, and sattva is the balance. So, and you can see that in every thing in nature. These three principles are always there. These are the three modes. A rock is not moving, a plant is growing, but human beings are walking around, running around, and the brains are working a different way. So these principles, or these modes that he calls them, are doing their own thing. So you do your action, but then you don't get caught in the results of it. What is happening here, caught in them by the attachment. Understand them as the laws of nature and these three modes interacting with each other, period. That's it. And then he also says, giving up thy works to me, right? So this is again that offering principle. Now here you can take it two ways. If you're very religious, you can say, okay, I'm doing it for Lord Krishna or Lord Jesus or whoever, right? But the deeper philosophical understanding here is that, remember, we have these four layers, right? The senses, our hands, our eyes, and all of that stuff, the external senses, and our mind, the intellect. And then there is something that kind of shines through this, which is the consciousness. If the awareness, we don't know, we cannot biologically prove it or anything like that, but there is something that kind of makes our eyes see things and interpret those signals into some intelligent thing, and so that consciousness ultimately is supposed to be the primary driver, right? And if you are doing your action that are driven from deep within, from the consciousness, it's as if when you are trying to do the action and you have an attraction towards something or a repulsion towards something, your mind is making you feel that way. And you, the consciousness being the super boss, you're saying, mind, shut up, right? And that requires quite a bit of strength to do that. To, whatever you were attracted towards, whatever was repelling you, for you to be equanimous towards it, requires quite a bit of strength. And that is the sacrifice. That is the yagna, he calls, the offering that you have to do. It is a very hard path, but that is what you have to do. When you think of it in that terms, that philosophical way of looking at it might seem a little bit harder. That is where the notion of deity, the notion of God, if you can believe, if you can bring that about in you, something higher principle than you, it just cleans up your act, basically. Giving up thy works to me with thy consciousness founded in the self, which is that deeper self, right? Free from desire and egoism, which mind and intellect will want to do. Fight delivered from the fever of thy soul, right? So it is going to need that intensity, the inner determination for you to do that. Devote your actions and let actions be free of past or future, right? Past and future, these memories, the things that are going to be impressions on your mind, that is what is going to cause you the desire and egoism, right? Okay, so now we go to chapter 4, and here now he's going to talk about the avatara, the incarnation. So he basically says that, up to this point, he has talked about how the actions need to be performed, and then he continues on the path of like, okay, well, when bad stuff is going on, a lot of things are going on, whensoever there is the fading of the dharma, right, and the uprising of unrighteousness, then I lose myself forth into birth. So you can take this again in two ways. One is, if you believe in God, God chooses to come down to the earth. So that is one way for people who believe in God. If you do not quite believe in God, but philosophically speaking, and this is just my interpretation, is if you really think about it, right? So when we are faced with a very intense existential crisis, we truly have to, like, it has to happen. Yeah, most of the time we are really living this very superficial existence, right? As we spoke last time, we're just happy, we earn our money and we kind of pay our bills and all that stuff, right? But that big bang that happens, right, in somewhere, interruption in your life, or disruption, if you will. So this surface living, superficial living, is really all guided through our likes and dislikes, and mind is very much in control. Your ego is very much in control, and you're kind of moving along in life. But here comes an existential crisis. What happens? You kind of feel like you can't believe what your eyes are seeing, what you're hearing, and the mind is confused. Your intellect is not working at that point, right? So these are the things that the unrighteousness effectively has taken over. Your kshetra, that we talked about, your body, mind, has now become Kurukshetra. It has become something like, I just don't know what to do. It's just so difficult, right? This is when your inner being, some deeper voice, is going to come to you, right? This is just my interpretation, okay? So there's two ways to look at it, where you can, and many times we see, right? We see in the society, you will suddenly see a Martin Luther King Jr. or Gandhi come to the stage, and they help out the whole world through a crisis. And these guys are leaders not for some random reasons. They have reached that stage because somehow they have been able to control these three elements, right? Their senses, their mind, and their intellect, to guide them so that they can rally people to do the right thing, the whole society to do the right thing for the whole society, right? And that can happen at a much larger scale, or it can happen deep within us, for the deliverance of the good, for the destruction of the evildoers, for the enthroning of the right? So you again want to put the right person. In this case, he wanted to put Arjuna back on the king's throne, right? And he says, I'm born from age to age. And then he talks about how this knowledge, it's not the first time I'm telling you, Arjuna. I have given this to Sun way back, to Ishvaku, Sun, of Sun, and then Manu, right? So these are all these different past times that, when this knowledge was passed along, and then it was forgotten for a while, and here I am again, giving it. So that's a mythical way of looking at it. But every so often, as things get out of control, somebody will feel very powerful, a deep voice, an inner calling comes to somebody or people or us, and then we take action. We take that action, and it's an incarnation effectively of God, if you will. In the most grievous of situations, mind, sense, intellect is not able to control the chaos, and the inner self will appear. Self appears and does the right action. Now, that this right action is not the karma that we talked about, right? Karma is something where you are doing it for results. Here, it is just an action. You have to do it. That's the call. Call of action at that point. You're not worried about good or bad. There's no desire for results. And this will not create any bondage, right? Because you're not really driven by any desire. One becomes really, when at that point of time, if this becomes your lifestyle, where things are coming from deep within and you're not guided by desires and everything, we stop dying every day, if you will. All these desires, all these sufferings are mini deaths, if you will. The biggest fear that we have is of losing, and then the next largest fear that we have is of death. So every time we lose, we have suffering. That's what it is. And if we don't let that guide our actions, and if we express happiness, while we are doing things, we basically have conquered death, if you will, right? Our body is going to die. All of that is going to happen. But that is the idea of immortality. If you look at it from Vedanta point of view, that's what it is coming to, right? So, and that's what Krishna is trying to say. Life's worries do not bring one down. And the cycle of birth and death is not going to be, you're not going to be impacted by that. So he talks about the three modes earlier, which is the tamas, rajas, and sattva, that guides the nature or the laws in the nature and stuff like that, and how they interact with each other. But there's also a different states of being. Now, this has been misconstrued as caste system in India, right? The fourfold order in 413, he says, was created by me according to the divisions of quality and active function. Now, this has been completely misconstrued by Indians, and it has brought about a lot of pain in India. And it has created this whole abhorrent caste system, effectively, right? But that's not what Krishna was talking about here. Know me for the doer of this, the fourfold law of human workings, who am yet the imperishable non-doer. So what are these four folds, right? So the four folds basically are the Brahmana, the highest level, who is Brahman basically means he just dwells in self, right? Remember, we talked about these four states, right? Senses, mind, intellect, and self. So Brahman is somebody who has gone past the desires of senses or mind or intellect, right? So he's always dwelling in the Brahman, and that's why he's called as Brahman, right? That is the highest state of being. The next is Kshatriya. Kshatriya is the warrior, and he is more driven by the good of the society, and he's, with very high qualities of rajas, and where action, right? So he is trying to protect people and all of that stuff, right? So there is this little bit of a, if you will, there's a desire to bring about good in the society and all of that stuff, right? So very action-oriented person. The next is, the third level is the Vaishya. Vaishya is the business folks. Now here, what happens is, Kshatriya is worried about larger community, society, and he's fighter, he's a warrior. Vaishya is very selfish. He is worried about gathering more wealth for himself. And a lot of his actions are driven by that. He's also very rajas, very action-oriented. He's not driven by self or balance or anything, but he is not lazy either. And he's very entrepreneurial, but really driven by greed. Now, if you look at it, most of us on this planet have really, I would say, because of capitalism or whatnot, we fall in this category, this Vaishya. We are always thinking about ourselves. And that is the category, where we all fit in. It doesn't matter what caste you belong to in India, right? Everybody is a businessman, effectively. And then the fourth class is the labor class, is what they call it. But really, it's a Kshudra. Here, the person is not driven by anything in life, right? He's very lazy, and all of that stuff. Now, what they did was they kind of associated that with somebody who does not rise up in the society and does menial tasks and things like that. So again, that's something that I think has been going on for ages in Indian society. To some extent, it still happens, but to some extent, it happens outside India too. Just not called caste system. We always have these different layers of societies, but really, this is about our inner state. One Swami, the way he puts it is, he says, when you're born really as a Kshudra. Kshudra meaning the fourth state, the lazy. You don't have any drive. There's no action, nothing. You can't do anything. You're a baby, right? So that is the first stage. then you kind of migrate towards like me, as a child. I want this, right? So that's that. Then you migrate towards Kshatriya, and eventually you are going to become a Brahmana. So there's ways to interpret this, the four modes, four states. And ultimately the goal being that, we want to dwell in the self. But dwell in the self basically means that however we act in the world, we are not acting driven by our senses or our mind or our intellect. That does not mean that we don't respond to something, that we see. The point is that we use our intellect and mind and senses as instruments. So for example, I'm sitting down right now. I'm not using my legs. But if I wanted to, I can just get up on demand and I can walk. I can use my legs. But with our senses, with our eyes and mind and intellect, what happens is we do not have a mechanism. Despite there is a mechanism, we don't use that mechanism to shut it down ever. And then that takes over our lives, right? So that's the part that he's trying to point to. And dwelling in self, meaning that you're in full control, you're the master of the domain, and you are now using mind when needed. Mind is needed. Mind is basically a mechanism for you to detect changes out there in the society so that you can protect yourself, protect other people, whatnot. It could be all kinds of things. But you use mind to detect that change. But then many times you just want to be with, in an equanimous state. And intellect is intellect, intelligence is needed. Our eyes are needed to see things, So all of that is required. It's not about giving those up. Others, again, who are devoted to controlling the breath. So now he talks about meditation here, right? A little bit. So others, again, who are devoted to controlling the breath. So this concept of controlling the breath, which also happens in yoga, is quite interesting. One of the Swamis kind of explains it in a slightly different way than the superficial understanding that comes about in this phrase here, right? To controlling the breath, having restrained the prana. The incoming prana is taking it in, apana is exhaling, right? Outgoing breath. Pour as sacrifice offering prana into apana and apana into prana. Okay, so this controlling of the breath, he calls out saying that some people are devoted to this. How can we understand this, right? So this is something that one of them explains as think of breath as incoming thoughts. So breath are these incoming thoughts and the thoughts that are guided by outside world, and they're coming into your mind somehow, right? And that happens all the time, right? And then we put out, based on our understanding, our biases, our conditioning, we create some other thoughts. And those are those outgoing thoughts about what we have just seen, right? So the perception of what we see. So we are not really seeing the reality. So there is this constant in and out of that. But then you want to restrain that thought. Remember, we talked about one of the meditation practices was for us to kind of be in a quieter place. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you start out in a quieter place, but eventually you can do that in a fish market if you wanted, right? The point is that you watch your thought process. A thought starts coming in, it leads to another thought, that thought leads to another thought. There's a train of thoughts. And those train of thoughts, most of the time, is our imagination of something that might happen in future regards to our loved ones or the country or whatnot, right? And then usually there is a doomsday scenario at the end of that thought process, the thought train. So how can we control that thought process, that train of thought? So many a time when that train of thought happens, remember we talked about the Om principle, right? So chanting, you just want to use that to break that thought, meaning reminder to yourself that, okay, this is pointless. Mind is just wasting your energy. don't do it, right? So that's one way of looking at meditation, right? And that is that, some people are devoted to focusing on this, right? Just focus on your breath. That also is a good way to kind of break your thought process. And then he also says, learn that, see, all of this stuff that he talks about, learn that by worshiping the feet of the teacher, by questioning and by service. And there's more to this phrase, but I just captured this. He says this is really important that you be the way I understand this, right, is be a good student. You're not always going to find Krishna out there. But if you're Arjuna, you can learn from life situations. You can find the deeper Krishna within you, right? And you can find Krishna in your friend, who is not bogged down by your life situation, your crisis, right? That can happen. So the point is surrendering, humility, and that's what he is talking about, right? Touching worshiping at the feet of the teacher, and humility. The key here is not the teacher. The key here is studentship. Can I learn something with humility, not out of arrogance? Learning ability to understand the essence, not the literal words, right? So all the stuff that is coming out here, there's like the breath and all that, right? So there is an understanding that different people can give. Now, if you look at Gandhi's translation, if you look at Aurobindo's translation, you can look at other translations, and you can use your own understanding of philosophy to come up with your own understanding, right? So these are all multiple teachers, basically, right, coming to guide you effectively, and maintain that surrendering attitude is what he's talking about. Surrendering to uncover deeper truth. This is how Aurobindo calls it, right? So the point is, everything that we live in life, every time, be it a learning moment, make it a learning moment. And the learning of what? Learning of not like just some worldly skills. While that is good, really, it's all about that deeper truth. Deeper truth is what? The knowledge, the self, that, hey, there is oneness between all the humans, right? So that needs to be a constant theme. It's almost kind of like, when we are people who have kids, right? When we are out working in the office, or flying on a plane or whatever on our own, and the kids are at home or school and whatnot, there is this constant thought in us that is like, oh, about my kid, hopefully he or she is safe or something, right? You're constantly thinking about that. And and it's a very subtle thought process that is going on in your head. And what needs to happen out of this is that at every juncture in your life, every time that you're transacting with the world, remember the self. Watch your mind, watch your anger, watch your fears. And that is the surrendering piece, right? So always constantly think about the self. And he who has destroyed all doubt by knowledge, and has by yoga given up all works, right, and is in possession of the self, is not bound by his works. Now, this last phrase here is a kind of interesting phrase, right? So he talks so much about action and this and that, and then he says, he who has destroyed all doubt by knowledge. So we can have a lot of questions and doubts and things like that, right? So he says that as you are going about life in daily life, be teachable, and now you are, you're getting closer to self, and you're doing your own yoga too, right? As you're acting, you're letting that action come from deeper self. Given up all works. So here he is kind of talking about renunciation effectively, right? So he's saying, do action, but then give up actions, and is in possession of self and is not bound by his work. So it's kind of interesting. So this confuses Arjuna. And now Arjuna then starts into this discussion in chapter 5 saying, look, you're confusing me, Krishna. Like, what is it that you want me to do? Like you once you talk about action, then you talk about knowledge, and then you say renunciation is better, give up the works and all that stuff. And he's like, oh, what am I supposed to do? So did somebody raise their hand? I guess not, right?
Oh, yes, I did, but you can continue if we're going through chapter 5 as well. I just had a question about chapter 4.
Oh, okay, go ahead. Yeah, go
Or
ahead.
an observation, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's so I'm not so much sure that it's giving up works. There's an injunction to perform works, and then there's a notion of giving up works. But it's from my reading, my interpretation is it's more giving up attachment to the results of your actions. It's not giving up actions.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that you're being very selective in your verses here, because we want to get through all this, and it's very insightful what you do, but there are so many good parts that.
Oh my God, yes. So I don't know if you have attended, Fred, in the past lectures. Have you attended those?
Yes.
Okay, so we did do a detail on chapter 4. So this is more of a summary. So just bringing about highlights.
Okay.
Yeah, these are highlights. So we used to do 2 chapters a day on a given time, but now we are going to do 1 chapter, so that way we have more time. But you're absolutely right. But see, put yourself in the shoes of Arjuna, who is about to go to battle, and he hears this from Krishna. Krishna gives him all these lectures about, hey, like action, you got to get it from deeper self and all of that stuff. And then he says, you got to give up all the works. And he's already so confused. So he's again going to be confused. So I'm glad you have that understanding. In fact, that's what he covers in the next chapter. So can I just keep going, and then we can come back? Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. So Arjuna says, like, wait a second, what are you? You're confusing me again, Krishna. And then he says, renunciation and yoga of works, giving up works and works, or karma yoga, both bring about the soul's salvation. These are steps. And depending on the kind of person you are, it can happen, renunciation can happen first, or most of us fall in the category of Arjuna, right? We believe in working, we believe in doing something. And hey, Jason, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just one quick question, before I got too confused. So in chapter 5, talking about renunciation, actually yoga is better than renunciation. Is that the teaching?
Well, yeah. So he says, okay, so another background that you have to understand for this chapter is really the ethos of Indian thought process. In India, right? I mean, maybe it happens right now too. I mean, definitely happened when I was younger, and much more so in the earlier times. There is a very high respect given to people who become ascetic, who give up the society, who go away in the forest, take up those orange clothes, right? There's a lot of respect to those people. Now, many of them are crooks, so they turn out to be crooks. So Krishna, remember Arjuna in chapter 1, he also says, look, I just want to be an ascetic. I just want to get away from this stuff. This is I'm going to create a lot of sin if I fight this battle and kill a lot of people. So he brings about this discussion again in the last line in chapter 4, saying, you giving up action, but that has to happen, ultimate goal is giving up works or the results of the action, as Fred was saying. But he puts it in very succinct fashion to really bring about that notion of renunciation or sannyasa, which is the actual term in Indian language. So people talk about sannyasa and brahmachari. Brahmachari means somebody who walks in Brahman, the consciousness. He's always in there. So the senses or desires do not impact him. And same is the idea with sannyasi, and we'll cover that. And the point here is that also, here is my sort of, if you will, archaeological or historical take on Gita itself, right? I mean, I'm no archaeologist, but based on what I have read and heard, Buddhism, when it came about, right before Shankaracharya, there was a massive, if you will, movement where people were leaving their households. They were going out in the mountains, with the Buddha, and the society was crumbling effectively, right? And here comes Shankaracharya with his Vedanta principle, and he is trying to explain to people, he's from southern India, he travels all the way up to north, I think from what I've heard, he goes all the way up to Afghanistan or something. But because it was all of that was Indian continent, right? And he is basically explaining to people, like, what is asceticism? Asceticism is about, and he's bringing about the concept of living in the same world, same thing that Krishna is talking about, right? And now I don't know the authenticity or like if these historical events actually happened. I hope they happened, and I hope Krishna was alive. Maybe he's not alive. Regardless of that, the message is important, right? So if somebody wrote this Gita, they wrote, and they probably injected that in the larger epic of Mahabharata. Thank God for that. It's an amazing contextual feat, if you will, on how they have achieved that, the author. One of the teachers also says that the person who wrote Brahma Sutra is one of the foundational texts after Upanishads for the whole Vedanta, right? So there is Brahma Sutra, Vedanta, and Bhagavad Gita, right? So these are the three foundational texts for the study of Vedanta. So Brahma Sutra was written by whoever wrote that. Some people attribute the writing of Gita to that person as part of the historical epic. So now again, there also, the idea was possibly that there was a lot of this kind of ascetic behavior that the society was showing, and that it was well respected and all that. But these writings, these teachers are basically pointing to saying that you don't have to go to the mountains, you don't have to go to the jungle, because it's not about exterior control of desires. Because desires is not out here, desires is inside here. So even when we go to the jungle, we go to the forest, we might still be imagining things, all those hundreds of friends that we left behind, they will still be carried with us to the jungle as we go to this asceticism. So he is talking about renunciation here. So let's dive into this. Renunciation and yoga of works both bring about the soul's salvation, but of the two, the yoga of works is distinguished above the renunciation of works, right? So why does he say that? So as I said, renunciation was considered as higher act, and karma is action desiring. Phala in Sanskrit basically means results, right? So karma basically is an action with the desire of the results. Renunciation of karma. So there are two places where, you can break this cycle. One is you just don't do anything, right? That's when you don't do anything, you are going to not get the results, meaning you're not going to be rich, you're not going to be, anything, so that's effectively sort of what the Brahmins do, right? Brahman, or the highest state people, right? So they have decided, they have chosen an ascetic lifestyle where they say, we are just not going to, run any business or participate in a war or anything like that. We are only going to be studying about self consciousness. And by doing that, guess what? We are not going to be desiring anything from the society. And that's how we break that cycle. And this might be a path of renunciation of karma and renunciation of works, if you will. And that is, typically an introvert person might understand this and they might be able to do this, right? But most of us tend to be extroverts. We are out there working in the society, and thank God, right? We want to live, and it's good that we are not all Brahmins. So we are working in the society, we are helping people are contributing, progress is happening, and all of that stuff, right? Now here, the idea is to break the cycle at the results. So you have, either break the action or break the results. So there's two places that you can break this cycle. Karma yoga is the desireless action, and renunciation of results is easier of the best path, or easier and best path. So dropping action, imagine you were Arjuna. Arjuna, being a warrior, he cannot drop fighting. He has always fought battles. Same for us, think of our professions. We cannot just get up one day and say, okay, I'm not going to do this. Part of it is, we can't pay the bills. The second is, our mind is, despite, let's say we win $1 billion lottery or something, even after that, our mind is not going to stop. We need that creativity to help us wake up in the morning. So we are going to be doing something, and that typically happens to be attached to our call, inner call, right? It could be a scientist, it could be a software engineer, it could be whatever. So in those actions that we have been called upon to do, that is something that we can use to achieve this renunciation that everybody thinks is such a high act. This is the teaching of chapter 5, right? He says, you want sannyasa? Well, drop all the desires, erase the karma, erase this need for results without abandoning world or actions. You want to continue being in this world. Going in jungle is not going to solve your problems. But renunciation, almighty armed, is difficult to attain without yoga. The sage who has yoga attains soon to the Brahman. It's the easiest path. Now, he is talking to Arjuna there, right? If he was talking to some other person who was an introvert person, maybe his advice would have been different. So now he next talks about the purification process, right? We typically our day-to-day stuff. One second, sorry. We need to look at some notes here. Yeah, so whatever we do, right, in our society, our actions and everything, it leaves a certain residue on our mind. Either we are elated or we are sad. We have regrets. Why did I not act like that back then? I might have damaged this person, or I might have done something. All of these actions, we can sit and reminisce. And as we are reminiscing, we might have bad feelings. The feeling of guilt can come over us. And that is that impurity of the soul, right? And that is that inner impurity that we do not want. So anything you do, any impressions that it leaves on your mind is going to cause you to suffer, and you might take wrong actions in the society. That's the point of it, right? So, and what is this purity? He who is in yoga, the pure soul, master of his self, who has conquered the senses, right? So he's acting from the self. He's not letting mind take over. Whose self becomes the self of all existences, right? I am acting from consciousness. I understand that you are a conscious being, is the same consciousness that is acting through you. So your actions, I will have an unbiased way of looking at it, right? So whose self becomes the self of all existence. And, if I have an unbiased way of looking at what you're doing, I might be able to take the right action, not righteous action, but right action. And also this extension of self, right? Whose self becomes the self of all existences. It's also this, we talked about this I and you, right? This me and the others. But if anything happens to this idea of me, mine, damage to my house, damage to my country, damage to my political party, damage to my family, whatever, right? We spring to action. So we want to protect that. We have that idea of love to this meanness. So if you can start seeing self in everybody, good or evil, it doesn't matter. You can have that same kind of love and a same kind of a deeper action in everything that you do, right? So when this happens, even though he does works, he's not involved in them, right? You do it 100%, but involvement means that you are attached again to that result, right? And that is that pure soul that he's talking about. In yoga, or, this is also, being in yoga is also the state of bliss, or being in yoga also means that, remember, now you have met yourself. Once you've met yourself, you can look upon the world as if it's a play. And you're not going to take things seriously, even though you're going to contribute sincerely, right? Has conquered over the senses, mind, anger, fear, all that stuff, to develop the purity of soul. Actions go on with equanimity, without any residue of karma left, right? So you will do the actions. I had introduced this term last time, or a couple lectures ago, which was kriya. Your kriya goes on, meaning the actions go on. Whatever is required of you to do will go on, but it is not going to be converted into a karma. How does it get converted into karma? When you have the desire for a result, right? So the action becomes a karma. And now, there is a metaphor that they use here. It's you're like a lotus leaf. If you ever see the lotus leaf, the water droplets do not attach to that leaf. They just kind of go down the leaf, right? So that is the desires they roll off easily off this person. So one is not attached to the leaf. One is not attached to the desire. And then, whatever is happening around you, just like the lotus grows in a dirty bog, you can flourish. You can be that amazing person. It doesn't matter what the outside circumstances are. And now, because the self is guiding you, your senses and mind and everything, and that equanimous attitude, the self becomes the self of all existences. It's kind of like sun is shining, right? Sun is shining on everything equally, be it good or bad. Sun does not say, oh, like that part of the neighborhood is a bad neighborhood, so I'm not going to shine, right? So that effectively becomes our view towards the world, basically. He who can bear here in the body, right? Not out somewhere, not, getting rid of your body parts or going out in the jungle, while you have everything, wife and husband and family, work, all the problems in the society, while here, he who can bear the velocity of wrath and desire, it's gonna happen. You can't run away from that. You're gonna have the desire. When that happens, what is a yogi supposed to do? Yogi is the one who says, mind, good, you're having the desire for this. and he is the master from that point of view. Like, so he is observing that desire play out in action. And he's not getting driven. What is the driven part of it when self is not acting is that the desire comes about, you get that happiness, and now you're craving for it. And that is the downfall, right? And that is not a yogi or yogin or yogi, whatever, the one who is in yoga or in bliss, right? So the happy man. And then he talks about yet another way of looking at this. There's a continuation of that meditation that we talked about earlier. Having put outside of himself all outward touches and concentrated the vision between the eyebrows and made equal the prana and apana moving within the nostrils, having controlled the senses, the mind, and the understanding, the sage devoted to liberation, right? The goal is liberation. Liberation from this cycle of birth and death, like we talked about. Birth and death comes about because of sufferings. So suffering, every suffering is a mini death, if you will. Or if you really want to believe in multiple lives, that's fine too, right? So same principle can go across lives. From whom desire and wrath and fear have passed away and is ever free, right? So this is the kind of meditation that we talked about, when Jyoti asked that question last week or a couple of weeks ago. Is how you can have the eyes, half. Oh no, that's coming in chapter 6, I think. Yeah, sorry, but yeah, effectively the same thing. When a man has known me as the enjoyer of sacrifice suffering, who is this me? Me is your deeper self, right? Philosophically speaking, as the enjoyer, or if you believe in God, Krishna, or Jesus, or whoever, or they are. That person is the ultimate enjoyer of my offering of all the worlds, right? The friend of all creatures, right? So he calls, that thing as your friend. And next he's going to say that's the only friend. In chapter 6, he kind of says that. He comes by the peace, right? And being in this state is dhyana. Dhyan was the original term, which became Zen. And if I was to bring it to a colloquial language, it could basically be being in the zone. When a football player is playing his best, basketball player is playing his best, that effectively, you're somebody deeper within is acting. There's a beautiful story that I'm not sure if we have time for. It's 3:40. Yoga is meeting with the self, as we talked about, right? So I hope you get this. This is that the dhyan comes about when your actions have purified, and now you can observe the wraths and desires as they are flowing through you, as a witness to it. As your anger is coming about, you say, okay, I'm getting angry. You observe that, right? So that is a practice of meditation. Meditation is all the time. It's not a special hour that you're going to do. It's constantly. Yes, you can take a special hour and sit in a room and follow this 5.27, 5.28. That's good. But the life is always meditation. And then ultimately, he brings about sort of a closure to the whole karma yoga. By self, thou shouldst deliver the self, right? You want to use yourself to free the self. And thou shouldst not depress and cast down the self, whether by self-indulgence or suppression, for the self is the friend of the self. And the self is the enemy too. If you do not follow, if you do not let your deeper voice guide you, it's going to be your own enemy. You will become your own enemy. Use the self to rise above the self. Make it your best friend. Only humans can rise above the gods, or can regress down beyond the demons, like we talked about, right? Rising above the gods are just these people who are enjoying the best things in life, if you will, right? In a way. They have all the luxuries and all that stuff, if you will, right? So their karmas, their good karmas are paying off, if you will, right? So that's another way to look at it. But that's not the goal. I mean, yes, that's good, but that's not the goal. The goal is knowledge. What is knowledge? Knowledge is self, right? So knowing who am I, asking better questions in life than just like, why am I so miserable, or why am I going through this problem? Yes, while that is the first outer face of the problem, go one level deeper, and like, why am I here, right? Or who am I? And not what am I, not about your profession, not about any of that stuff. Who am I? Like, who is this person who is experiencing this? Those kind of questions will help you aspire the highest, manifest the Buddha, dwell in self, right? So this is, there is no savior coming. Savior is going to come within you. So while the saviors from outside are good, really it's going to be inside you. All right. So you're going to find your life's problems. You're going to have a better understanding. The solutions are going to be within you, is the point here. He who is equal in soul to friend and enemy. Remember, he talks about here, he is kind of picking on Arjuna. Because Arjuna talks about like, oh, that's my grandpa and that's my teacher, and how can I kill them? Because they are on the opposite side of the thing. But then he also hates his cousin brother, Duryodhana, right? A lot. So had he just looked at him, he would have said, okay, I don't want any Bhagavad Gita at this point, right? I'm just going to go attack this person. So here, he is really, Krishna is saying, he who is equal in soul to friend and enemy, and sorry, I think that might be a typo, and to neutral and indifferent, also to sinner and saint, he excels, right? So there needs to be a very equanimous attitude towards anything in life, so that's really the point of this. He should set in a pure spot for, okay, so now he's talking about the practice, right? So remember, he talks about how to sit, comfortable seat, really, that's the point. Comfortable seat, basically what it does is it allows you to forget your body. Remember, like right now you guys are sitting, but you're not consciously worried about your hand, for example, right? Because your hand is sitting in a comfortable place. So when you are comfortable in a place, the body drops. Body is not there. You can now focus on something deeper, the I, right? And there, seated with a concentrated mind, again, when it is fluctuating between different ideas, desires, thoughts, and all of that stuff, right? That's not good. Concentration is key. Concentration is, again, as the thoughts are coming about, you can just say Om or chant whatever chant you want to chant. Break that thought, right? So now you're focusing concentration, and you're concentrating on what? Not some imagery or something. You're really concentrating on that, gaining that higher knowledge, the self. And with the workings of the mental consciousness and the senses under control, he should practice yoga for self-purification, holding the body, head, and neck erect, motionless, the vision drawn in and fixed between the eyebrows, not regarding the regions. The mind kept calm and free from fear. And the vow of brahmacharya. Brahmacharya is basically, charya means walking or traveling or moving about. Brahma is Brahman, or the consciousness. So you're one who is moving about in consciousness, not in the field of desire, right? That is brahmacharya. Observed, the whole controlled mentality turned to me, the divine, me, your own self, right? Yourself, or the higher self. He must sit firm in yoga, wholly given up to me. Again, given up to me meaning not following the desires in your mind and all that, right? Again, me here means not just Krishna, but the self, so that the lower action of the consciousness shall be merged in the higher peace. That in which the mind becomes silent and still by the practice of yoga, that in which the self is seen within the self by the self, right? So that is the thing. That is what he's trying to achieve. Whenever the restless and the unquiet mind goes forth, it should be controlled and brought into subjection in the self. So as the thoughts come about and they are taking you down to a deep end, stop it, and the best way to stop it is utter that long Om, the root word of everything. Having attained to the world of the righteous and having dwelt there for immemorial years, he who fell from yoga is again born in the house of such as are pure and glorious. So here is the interesting concept of rebirth that he tries to explain. Now, rebirth can be understood as life, death, but as I had explained a couple lectures ago, it can also be understood as our day-to-day living. Our day-to-day living is also, it's a life and death. We all constantly are gaining new cells and losing cells, so it's a death. So Krishna, Arjuna basically asks him, right, that, hey, if I do not achieve this, this state that you want, you're talking about, yogi, what is going to happen? So he is saying that even that little bit thing that you're going to do, it is going to help you in your next birth. You're going to be born in a house of such as are pure and glorious, meaning you can then continue on this practice. It's not like you're going to read Gita up to chapter 6, and if you die, you're not going to continue on chapter 7 in your next birth. That's not what is meant here. The point is that you're going to, because your inner being has, the soul has purified to some extent, you're going to find a better body for the next life, and you're going to continue this practice in some fashion going forward. But if you end up near your deathbed, it's talked somewhere, but I did not capture that here, with a lingering desire, like, oh, I did not do this, I did not climb Mount Everest, or God knows whatnot, all kinds of things. That desire, if that's your last thought as you're dying, it's going to impact your next birth in whatever fashion, right? It could be positive, negative, and all that, right? So that's how the activity of desire that leads to more karma and all that stuff. The yogi is greater than the doers of ascesis or penance, or even men of knowledge. So this is kind of interesting, right? So just to cover this, even if you do not attain in this life, or desire disrupts or distracts one from self, if you are in the path, I think we covered this. Yogis are trust the path of desireless action. Self takes care of their final goal of meeting the self, right? So that's the surrendering is going to help you do that. And this yogi trying to achieve this is definitely not about controlling senses externally. It's not like, you need to shut your eyes and not, like, oh, that's something bad, I'm not going to see it, or I'm not going to listen to this and all that stuff. That's not the point. It's something that is deeper within you that imagery is evoking. How do you control that deeper desire? That's the point. Or excelling in actions, like somebody wants to become the best rocket scientist or God or whatnot, right, out in the world. While that is good, that is not going to help you reach the self, right? So that's what he talks about in 6.46 here. And also just knowing about the paths, it could be this, it could be that. And this, a lot of people, interested in a lot of reading. While that is great, unless and until you bring it in your practice, it's not going to bring you closer to the goal that is, reaching the self. So there's basically 3 steps, right? So renouncing the fruits, or renouncing the doership, and ultimately understanding that self is directing everything in nature. And so there's this notion of oneness. Action arises for us human to find the divinity within us, right? So that's you want to look at action always for that. So that way we can go away from bondage to liberty. So this is mukti, or moksha is another word that they use. And Gita, as you know, these first 6 chapters were about karma yoga. They're talking about how we can take an action, make it selfless, and offer it to the self or Krishna or Lord or whatever, right? The next section kind of goes into Jnana Yoga, knowledge of the true self, so he goes about what is this self, right? Now, when you gain that knowledge, that does not mean you drop the actions. Our actions are going to go on. Don't forget about the first 6 chapters, Karma Yoga. So these are not separate paths. This is built on each other. That's what Aurobindo explains in one of the essays, right? He says Karma Yoga is the foundation. Jnana Yoga sits on top of it. You still do both of them. Then you understand the idea of devotion. Why does devotion help, right? So that is the third part. And the final goal is oneness with self, seeing self in everything in nature. And I think, again, we have shot past the hours. Definitely. This is what happens when you have a very controlled slide set. Sorry about that.
Well, that's great. So
yeah. So go ahead if somebody wants to speak or say something. I'm done. This is my last slide for the first 6 chapters.
oh, thank you, Sasha. I think that's a different feeling, than reading chapter by chapter and go through the 6 chapter in continuously. So
Right.
it's a different experience. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels a little more continuous.
Yeah,
Like a whole.
different. But I think we need both. I think.
Yeah. Any lingering ideas or feelings? Anybody?
I have a question.
Mhm.
Can you talk to us just a little bit? You said a couple different things in your discussion. This has to do with caste. You had said something about how caste is used today, and I'm paraphrasing in a negative way. And we don't even have to go down that rabbit hole.
No, absolutely. Go down the rabbit hole.
No,
It's
no, no. Well, I just mean I think
okay.
we're intelligent people. We don't need to rehash that. Explain to me, because you did this earlier, but I want to better understand it. When caste is used in the Gita, reiterate for us, if you don't mind, how that notion of caste is different from today's notion of caste as
Yeah.
something
So
inherent.
nowhere in Gita is caste mentioned.
Right.
Caste not mentioned at all. He talks about these inner stages of human being.
Mm-hmm.
And he also talks about how our inner calling is guided by the 3 principles, right? Tamas, Rajas, and Sattva. Meaning, do you have balance, or do you have more kinetic energy where you want to run around and do things, or are you lethargic, right? Are you more inertia driven, right? So those 3 things, a mixture of those brings about our inner state. And that inner state then makes us be Elon Musk or makes us be a janitor at school. Now, that being Elon Musk or being janitor at school does not come about because my dad was Elon Musk or my dad was a janitor, which is what happened in India, right? In India, what happened was that basically they said, oh, a Brahmin's son will be Brahmin. A king's son will be king. Now, that has happened all across the globe, right, to some extent. But it was quite predominant, and it was made. But there are some swamis who kind of explain it in a way from reincarnation point of view and rebirth point of view, where they say that if you were born in a Brahmin family, you will have the Brahmin upbringing. So when you die, or when you, it is easy for you to be born to a Brahmin parent. The soul, all your subtle body, we talked about subtle body in another lecture. that subtle body is now finding another body where it wants to be. And why does subtle body go from one physical body to another body is because there are some karmas that the debts have to be paid. So you're finding that new body, and then that becomes easier, is how one Swami explains. But this is not explained anywhere in Gita. Okay. It was also a way to control the society, if you will, also manage the society. And if you also think about it from practical point of view, it is easier to see how a Brahmin father might take interest in making his son into a Brahmin, teach him the right teachings. Or a cobbler can teach his son to be a better cobbler, things of that nature. So that there is a way to justify the caste system, but really from the understanding of Gita, I don't think it matters. I mean, you could be living anywhere and at any time, and the caste system is kind of gone away. Now it is more of an economical layering in India, which is true in America or any other place too, right? So no more do you see all these old ideas of caste system much. You can find a person who is so-called lower caste or to be a millionaire in India, or you can find a Brahmin or a Kshatriya or a king, a pauper in India now because of democracy and all that stuff. So yeah, the Gita does not talk about there's no mention of caste the way we understand as caste. Okay, so Jason?
Yeah, probably the same question, but in a different angle, because I also pay attention on the chapter 4, verses 13, right? And different translation. I think some translation translate as caste, right? Some translate as caste. Yeah, and the varna, right? Is it varna?
Right, varna. Now, varna does not directly mean caste, but yeah, it can mean caste, yeah.
Okay. So but that matter, we can have our interpretation. But my question is, forget about what you believe, just based on the message from Gita. Does Gita will assume if you were born as a street cleaner, then you have to clean the street. If you born a warrior, you have to fight. Is that predetermined at your birth?
No. Nowhere in Gita does it say that. What it says in that particular line that you highlighted, for the fourfold order was created by me, by self.
So now, you decide.
No, exactly.
So I can decide I'm going to go in the military to fight, even my father was a street cleaner, something like that.
According to the divisions of quality and active function. So what that means is, what is my inner calling, my quality? Remember those.
I'm very smart. I want to work for Google.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
And know me for the doer of this, the fourfold law, who am yet the imperishable non-doer, right? So ultimately, in all of these four categories, whatever you choose, let's say you choose to clean the street. Don't put down yourself. Who is the doer? Understand who is the doer. The doer is ultimately the self. Lord is working through you, right? That's one way of looking at it. So yeah. Anyways, yeah, I'm not a very
so next one, go to
person. Yeah, but yeah.
So let me monitor it. Okay, go to Joe and Casey, please.
Yeah. Oh, Kathy, I think raised first, maybe.
Thanks.
Let's go lady first. So
New
Indian way. So.
Yeah.
Quick question. Do you post the video or the slides perhaps somewhere online?
Yes.
Okay, so the video is on the Meetup page, and then Shashi, will you have a separate slide?
Now it's a new set of slides. Yeah, I can.
Okay, send to me and I will post.
Yeah.
Okay, so Casey, you in the every Meetup page, if you scroll down to the very bottom, we have all the you clicked for the past presentation. So you will come with a spreadsheet. Okay, so for past 2.5 years, Most of them, you can find the slide and the video, most of them. Sometimes I forget.
I think let's just do the video, because I think you might want to see not just this video, but we have had 4 or 5 sessions, I think, before this. Oh, no, sorry, 3 and 4 sessions. So 4 sessions before this. I think that might be a better way for you to follow along, because whatever is in the slide is very, like, it really needs quite a bit of a context to understand. So it's kind of not the best way to understand this. Yeah. So Joseph.
Yeah, the one thing really quickly, and maybe you could just walk me through a little bit, is this, just really quickly, the idea of a personal relationship with God. I mean, that's always I've struggled with. I understand that that's part of Bhakti Yoga, but I've struggled with it in the sense of that, how does everybody have this personal relationship with God?
Yeah.
And the God is in the self.
God is in
like
self.
so you have this, I mean, there's the non-dualist approach, and then there's this other aspect of it that talks
Absolutely.
about a personal relationship. So I struggle with that a little bit.
Absolutely. And yeah, you're right. You're right. And it's a much it's very hard to be a non-dualist. Very, very hard. And the Bhakti Yoga, it becomes, if you are lucky, and I consider people who can understand God out there are luckier, easier path, because now you can actually, what you're doing is, in one of the lectures we covered this, where you're basically taking an idol that is sitting out there and you're giving it much higher power than you. So you're controlling your ego, basically. You're saying, I am something smaller than this thing, and I'm going to offer. And I really honestly believe, like really from deep within, I believe that, it's kind of like, akin to, let's say, let's say you love your mom a lot and your mom is visiting your apartment or house. You tend to want to make sure that everything is good and you are a good person, everything, so you don't want to disappoint her, if you will, right? So I'm just taking an example, or there might be some other respected person in your life, right? Now here, when we create this deity out there, that deity out there, there are lots of these examples in India where, you have these lover, paramour type of relationships, if you will, with God. Like Meera is an example of that, where she falls in love with Krishna while she was a baby. And she is, there are lots of songs that she writes and poetries and all that stuff, just beautiful love story between an imaginary God and this real human being. And that's one way, that's the Bhakti Yoga. But Bhakti can also mean our constant devotion basically means that whatever I am doing, I'm constantly, I come to a state where it's a state of dhyana or zen, if you will. The state of dhyana comes from yoga. So you got to go through the steps of yoga, right? So the steps of yoga is going to bring you to a point where, you're going to look at your action in a different form. And so now you're devoted to that cause, right? So you understand that my old style of living, driven by desire and everything, has been causing a lot of suffering for me. Now I choose to live like this. And this is, in fact, the path that Buddha takes, right? So Buddha basically just says, there's no God, there's nothing, and there's this shunya, there's this nothingness that is guiding me. And, if you like that path, and if you, I think Buddhism is a great approach for that, right? Taoism, same thing. Japanese Zen, same thing. Samurai, samurai is a great example of how you can consider war a action for inner peace. That's what the samurai warriors are. And that's the devotion, right? That's the devotion to your art, the devotion of your calling, inner calling, and your devotion in the sense that you're not going to bring any desire or anger or fear guide your actions. If you can constantly watch that, that is connecting with your inner self. I mean, does that kind of paint you these two ideas of non-dualism and dualism in a way?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, and I appreciate the use of the samurai actually, just to draw the parallels even with Arjuna.
Yeah, yeah, great. Okay, all right. So Jason.
I think somebody have a hands up. Oh, the Trouble, you have a question? You have something want to comment?
I did, but given the time, I will wait. I undoubtedly it will come up again. It was a piggyback off of what you had said. So why don't you go ahead?
But basically, I'm going to close the meeting soon. In about 5 minutes. So if you have,
it's totally fine. Well, I'll just make this observation. I really like the translation that you had us read, Sashi, because my translation I read, book 143 says this: the Dharma of caste and the eternal Dharma of family are uprooted by these wrongful acts of family destroyers, since they create a blending of caste. That now the translation you had us read is so different, because it says, by these misdeeds of the ruiners of the family leading to the confusion of the orders, the eternal laws of the race and moral law of the family are destroyed.
Okay, so let me pause you just for a second. Okay, so chapter one is dejection, and that is Arjuna speaking. Arjuna is speaking from what the current understanding of the society was. And that society at that point, there are two philosophies, right? There's the Vedas, which is very ritualistic, and Vedanta is the actual philosophy, kind of builds on these rituals. And it says these rituals have a deeper understanding. Most of the time, people do not go past the rituals to get into Vedanta. So Gita is that jumping thing. So the first chapter heavily talks about, look, all these different castes that we have created, we have our women that need to be respected. If the husband is going to die in this battle, who's going to take care of the women? They are going to be left out, and they are going to have problem. So whatever caste that woman belongs to will be tainted, right? So these are all the problems that Arjuna brings about. And then Krishna corrects him, saying, the way you understand this breaking of caste system, or caste coming to a bad state, is really a wrong understanding. So the correct understanding, he says, there are these four folds. The four folds have nothing to do with where you are born, has to do with your inner qualities. So he is kind of countering. So whatever you read in chapter 1 is, think of it, it actually says, Arjuna says this. So there's a section that, he basically lets Arjuna go through his depression. The whole chapter is all about Arjuna's depression. And then second chapter comes along and says, Krishna talks, or they call him Blessed Lord, the Blessed Lord, or whatever, right? So that, that has different understanding. It could be the friend, his deeper self, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, chapter 1 is not the reality. Chapter 1 is the misunderstanding of Veda and how the society was established around that. And here comes Krishna saying, break all those norms. Those are all, he talks at different places, this word pakhandi. Basically, these are the guys who have taken the knowledge and brought about ruin in the society. He calls them out. There are definitions of what is a pandit, the true knowledge person, versus what these current pandits are doing out there in the society. So the so-called priests, in the society. So he kind of calls that out further along as you read. So who is your author, by the way, the reader?
Yeah, so I mean, that was my point, The
Who's the
translation
author?
you
Who's
get-
the author? The book author?
I'm reopening my Kindle so I can answer your
I sorry. I thought you were going again into the discussion. No, it's okay if you don't have.
I was to buy some time, but to answer your question, she is hold on. I have to scroll to the top, the front.
Jason, if you want to stop the recording, that's okay, I guess.
There's got to be an easier way to get here.